Yeah.
You got cool being on staff here, bro.
Yeah, he's on brand.
You were never this cool.
That shirt kind of looking fire.
You were never this cool.
He delivered a great exhortation yesterday.
He
Did he
did.
really?
Yeah, he did.
Oh
That
shoot,
goatee going on, bro.
man, bro. Yeah, it's the Count of Monte Cristo.
That
vibe
is
right there.
100%.
You leveling up, bro.
Yeah. Are we rolling?
No, we were, but we cut it.
You were, and then you cut it. Oh, you guys didn't even see the new set. Did they turn
Is it on?
You turned it off.
We're having issues with ProPresenter right now.
Yeah, let's not hope that happens for the new podcast. Right. No, I'm just playing. I saw it up for a second, and then it's gone now. So
I mean, y'all got a full-on camera angle over there too. Now we can see you
Yeah,
guys
look
right
at-
there.
where can you see?
Yeah, you guys are on camera.
Yeah, you can see Nancy and Alize.
Yeah, that's cool.
Holding down, producing this joint. I like it. Wait, what are you nudging about, Alize?
She's a producer here.
Oh.
Like,
Where everybody's getting promotions in this season right now. So
Amen.
what was your previous role on this show, Alize? Yeah.
always
It was
Photos and
photographer.
social.
Okay, so you're one of the producers now, all right?
That's right.
So,
That's good. Yeah.
in nomine Patris Espiritu Sancti, you promoted. You put that on your LinkedIn. Producer of Beyond the Letter
That's
podcast.
right. And Beyond Edu and Bible Club.
Yeah.
Just put them all. Put them all on.
All the trips.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always the hard part when people you introduce yourself. Some people go, "You have a podcast. Introduce your podcast." Like all of them. Like
Yeah,
no, that's what I have to ask.
exactly.
Let me introduce all of them.
You might as well just start a network, dog.
For
At this
real.
point, might as
BTL
well.
network.
Might as well.
I'm
I
gonna
was gonna-
start
I
the
was-
A side.
Bro, I was literally going to say A side. A side. It's the
Welcome
better
everybody
side.
to the A side
Welcome to the
network.
A side.
Yeah.
We got multiple podcasts here.
Yeah, there's the B side, but we're the A side, and so then we'll just then we'll get swallowed by the B side. We'll get picked up. Welcome everybody to Beyond the Letter podcast. In the house, we got Will. Did you get any feedback on that last episode we got, Will? I haven't heard
Not
anything
yet,
yet,
not
but it
yet.
just
I
aired.
haven't,
I've heard a
I
few,
haven't.
like I've
seen
gotten
the
a few
comments.
tags.
Yeah,
I've gotten
yeah,
some
yeah,
tags,
yeah,
but
yeah.
but no one-on-one text yet. But
Yeah.
that was a fun. I enjoyed that
was a
episode.
good one.
It's nice talking church and leadership. And in the house, we got Gabriel. In the house, the Bible scholar, biblical languages.
Yes, sir.
Let's go.
Genius with the Bible Club new podcast T-shirt that airs in the fall.
All
There we
right.
go.
All right.
Bible Club Daily Word Special. That's going to be a fun one. And then we got Sammy Rodriguez in the house,
Let's go.
who's part of now the Beyond the Letter team.
Let's go.
And the
Here I am.
Patriot fam. So we're going to be seeing a lot. As much as we see Will, we'll probably be seeing Sammy.
Let's go. Come on,
go,
baby.
dog.
Part of the fam.
We're gonna cause too many problems.
Hey, here we go. Here we go.
Well, this
It's
guy
gonna be
got too much-
crazy.
we got too much dirt on each other, bro.
Listen,
Way
it's gonna
too
be
much dirt.
crazy. The podcast is gonna be clipped, because we're gonna say some controversial stuff,
Yeah,
and then it'll be like edited.
But, yeah. Question number one, Sammy. Who are you voting for? No.
Yeah, amen. Kanye, is he still on a ticket? No, I'm just kidding.
Is Kanye still there? So Sammy gonna be on much more now.
Yeah.
Because he's joining BTL host team. He's joining the Patriot fam, which is the church that this
Yeah.
is recorded at.
Yep.
And so you join the team. You helping us get further. You're pitching ludicrous ideas.
That's right, that's
like
right.
You just before we started recording, you pitched doing a
100%.
church pop up in Houston.
That's right. Shout out to my Houston people. Come on, comment. Say where you're listening from, what city.
And by the way, for people who listen, we're in California.
Hey, that's what we do,
We're in
though.
a place called Rancho
We're just
Cucamonga.
gonna
By the
hang.
way, just Google that place.
We're just gonna hang. We're gonna pop up in different cities. We're gonna take this podcast on the road, and we're gonna go around.
Yeah.
Get ready. It's
Yeah,
gonna be
it's
exciting.
cool to team up with some other pastors.
That's what I'm
if
saying.
If you want to team up, Abe might be on your boy
Yeah,
next week.
that's right.
So if we make it work, we make it work. But he's just church planted in
go-
Houston.
and going there and
So we
seeing
could
it,
do a BTL pop up
That's
at
what I'm
his
saying.
church or wherever
Yeah.
wherever they're meeting
and hear what's going on, and
yeah.
some people are gonna jump more into Patriot family. We'll see what.
It's a cool view.
Yeah,
know?
you never know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, Sammy's like, yeah, we should do some like Patriot pop-ups in cities, and I'm going like, yeah, man, doing something maybe in LA or Carson, like that could be cool. We could, we could even go to Glendale or
Right,
something.
right,
and he's
right.
like, yeah, Houston.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. We gotta
It's
do
like,
it.
wait.
Hey, Sammy's a dreamer, dog. He's gonna take y'all to Mars.
It's because
bro.
Pastor Adam got a crazy word. So get ready,
Oh,
everybody.
that's true. He did get a crazy
man.
word at that retreat.
It did. It
we
did
should
happen.
talk about that, bro.
We should.
We should
Yeah,
process some
yeah.
of that. Actually, I'd be
No,
curious.
Yeah.
because my life has gone downhill since that day.
Bro, hey, I didn't.
I'm not
Did,
even
did I
lying,
did I
bro.
tell both of you guys
I'm not
about?
even lying.
I told both of you guys about the tire almost falling off my car.
Yes.
Oh, he almost
Yes.
died that day.
Literally.
You almost died that night. Your tire was on one
Yeah.
nut.
So-
There's 5 nuts
Yeah.
on your tire.
No, seriously.
It had one left.
So
Hey,
I
just to give you a context, we were at this retreat,
Yeah.
and there was this service at the end of the retreat, the last night service, and people just get called out and get words. But both of these brothers got like profound, prophetic,
Yeah.
accurate
Yeah.
words from different people.
Yeah.
And I
And then-
cried that night.
You did cry.
And I legit told
You
y'all
did cry.
I haven't cried since 2020.
Bro, that's almost probably the same day in 2020 I cried too. So it's like I'm the same way. I'm like,
Julian looked at
I'm
me
a wuss,
like
bro.
so
I
he-
cry like 3 times a day.
Yeah, Julian thought I was joking. I was like, bro, I haven't cried since 2020, man. Like a real cry.
No, for real.
Like a real cry.
Yeah.
I haven't cried.
So
You
what
know,
happened, bro? You almost
no.
died that
So
night.
we end that our kind of moment at Young Guns, and then my wife isn't feeling good. So for those listening, we're about to have our second kid. So we got a 2-year-old. She our daughter, his name's Pippa. She turns 2 on Sunday. We got a baby boy on the way, so we're excited. Used to say we want 3 to 5 kids, but then in this economy, crazy. But I wanted to get back to help wifey out because she wasn't feeling good. So I'm driving back. It's midnight. And you know when you're like driving in your car and you feel like maybe a tire's rubbing against a bumper or something's off. So I'm driving down in Ramona in San Diego. Now, if you know where that is, there's a lot. It's on like a mountainside and you're driving down and it's dark.
yeah, it's like 40 minutes off the freeway of just
yeah, easy.
winded roads.
All over.
you know?
So
Yeah.
every time I turn left, it feels like a little different, but not too bad. So then I'm finally down the free the like that Ramona, that windy road.
Yeah.
I'm on the freeways. I'm past Oceanside on the 5. Now, when your alignment's out in your car, you know when your kind of wheel shakes. So I'm looking and I'm looking at the PSI where the tires are, and like there's nothing that's looks flat, but I'm like something's going on. So I see a what is it called, a rest stop, and I'm thinking, I'm like, man, do I just blaze home and just get back to wifey, or should I stop? So luckily, last second, I pull over, go all the way to the end. I park the car where the trucks are because there's no parking, and I walk around the car. All the tires are fine. I'm like, let me look at one more thing. I look at the lug nuts, and the back left tire has of 5 one lug nut holding on,
and it's loose, right?
No. There's one that's tight, and then there's a second one that I could unscrew, like full on,
my
like take
gosh.
off. The tire is coming off, and if it would have fallen off on the the windy roads,
man.
could have rolled down the mountain. I could have died. If it would have fallen off, I was going 80 on the freeway. I know, cops. I was going 64 on the freeway.
Got a lot of
No, you were
cops
going
here.
80 in Mexico.
Yeah, I was going 80 in Mexico, and then when I came to the U.S., 64. But then I stopped, and I was like, this is crazy. AAA guy comes. We start talking. I tell him, yeah, I got to get back for the wifey. He was going to steal some lug nuts. He's like, let's just see if there's any lug nuts around you can put it on. I'm like, just tow me, bro. Tow me.
Let's walk the road.
Yeah. Because he didn't want to tow me back to Huntington. Well,
Yeah.
he tells me he just got divorced, 3 kids, whole story, crazy story of what he has at his house.
Because he's taking you to Huntington.
He's
at this
taking me
point?
back to Huntington. We're driving
So that's like another hour.
another hour in and out of
Oh my
in and
gosh.
out of prison, all this different stuff. Used to follow Jesus. The closest he felt to God was when he was in this men's home. And so I'm talking with him, and I'm like, man, I just believe this is a divine appointment. I was on our other buddies, Pod, Kevin, and Ben's.
Yeah.
And we were talking about how disruptions are opportunity for miracles. And so I just was thinking, I was like, man, this is such a horrible disruption. Could have died or badly injured. But I just started talking to this guy. I'm like, hey, now's your time to recommit your life to Jesus. As we're driving, gives his life back to the Lord. Pray for him. He tells me he has all this kind of demonic art that he's been drawing,
That's what I
skulls
like
and all
about
this stuff.
Sammy. Sammy's
Sammy's
going to be
wild
like, do you
out.
know Jesus?
Yeah, exactly. And then right there, so I was thinking, I was like, man, the devil tried to take my life. I'm going to take one from him. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, hallelujah.
Hey,
Hero punch.
Rabashoto.
Hey,
Take it. Fire. We in a crazy time. But like Will said, we should unpack because you had a crazy
Well,
word.
hold on, though.
Okay, keep going.
You missed the context where, because I found out, we knew that night.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
But then you told me a couple days later, I
Yep.
saw you. You were like, yeah, I literally got my oil changed that morning, and I told them not to rotate my tires, and they started to rotate them, and the
Yep.
manager came out and said stop.
Yep.
But they forgot to screw him.
Yeah,
all in.
so essentially what happened was we won't shout out the dealership because they're great. But I went to get the oil change. Didn't want the tires rotated, but a lot of times these guys put the car up and then they'll just do it real fast. And so someone probably said, "Hey, don't rotate the tires." So they must have unscrewed it but not fully screwed the back like
started
fully
to and
in.
then got stopped mid.
That's what I'm
you know,
thinking.
yeah.
And so it just was, again, it's those moments where God just protects. Because honestly, I'm telling you, when I was driving down that mountain, every time I turned left, now that I know, the wheel was shaking, almost coming off.
Oh yeah.
And so if it would have fallen, it was the divine,
devastating. Yeah.
It would have. So just grateful that the Lord saved my life, and then grateful that we're a part of this Patriot fam.
Wait, so are you guys gonna share the word that you got? Are you gonna get there? Or?
Yes. No. Yeah. I think. Well, yeah, we could get
I'm
there.
curious.
I'll
Yeah.
maybe I'll let when you guys start, because it was I have a retention of it. I remember most of it, but because it was dedicated towards me, it was emotional.
Yeah.
It's like you guys might have heard stuff that I didn't, if you remember more than I do. And then
we'll say like this. So that
maybe reclaim the night, because I think people could apply that.
Exactly.
Because we do it all the time now through Brad and our other circles. Like the trick is, because you can make spirit-filled moments really weird.
Yeah, for
or
sure.
you can make them really authentic.
Exactly.
And one of the ways you could do it, and we didn't do it this trip, which led to the corporate. So normally what we do at a Young Guns with Brad Lomenick is we break off into like 3 to 4 people, and you could know them or not know them, and then you just spend time talking, and then what you do is you say, hey, why doesn't everyone take turns and just start to affirm something you see in someone's life, and then allow the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit may start to, as you're just affirming. So I could just be like, Will, I love the way that you're a dad. And as I'm talking about that, I love the way you father and you take your kids out. The Holy Spirit may like start kind of guiding me to then start hitting so even when times you feel that maybe you're failing, and then for Will, that's like, oh man, this is on the moment.
Yeah.
And so you can either just affirm something in kindness, but like 80% of the time as a spiritual believer, as you're starting to lead with just an affirmation, it does start to go into a word of knowledge.
That's right.
Which that's what we would call it. So then you move into a word of knowledge. So we normally do that with 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And Brad didn't do that retreat.
Right.
So then we were hanging out with Brad before our kind of worship night that we tend to do, and we were just like, Brad was just like, hey, if you telling us, we were sitting together, and hey, if you got anything for the guys tonight while we worship, just feel free to take over the service.
Yeah, for
Which
sure.
is like great leadership. Brad's in charge, but I call him the Wizard of Oz. He's just behind the
He's
curtain.
he's a wizard.
So he goes up to us and goes, hey, you guys got something for service, do whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
We're like, okay.
Yeah.
And then we get in the room with 60 guys and we say, hey, we didn't get a chance to affirm anything in anyone. We didn't break off in groups this trip.
Yeah.
We think right now would be collective corporately. If anyone wants to affirm something or have a word, we're going to spend some time worship. Come grab the mic.
Yeah.
That's kind of how the night, that's for context, then that's what happened, right?
For sure.
And that's what started the thing. So I'll let you take over.
And then I would say this is that the whole goal of these leaders coming together is about finishing well.
Yeah.
And so we talk about finishing well. And then one of the things that we talk about usually in the beginning, and we talked about throughout the few days, was what is a current pain point in your life, which we always talk about. And one of the things we said is vulnerability is a superpower, because, we can't always be vulnerable with everybody. Because sometimes people will, I said this before, but people might weaponize your vulnerability and kind of make it come against you. But with the right setting and when there's trust, vulnerability will produce breakthrough in your life. And that's the goal. Like when we come together, we want to have breakthrough, we want to have better marriages, we want to be a better, son, we want to be a better husband, father, all that.
Leader.
Pastor, leader, business, whatever that is. So like Adam was opening up, so we do this, a little bit of worship and open it up. And Brad kind of opens it up, what he calls kind of like an all skate, which essentially is a trust in us to come together. So what's really cool is Bishop Mesa over here, Adam, he, and you'll get that when the word comes, he opened up the night and he just said exactly what he said to everyone. Hey, we feel like God is going to move. God's going to, encounter you. Get ready for a word, kind of set the tone and expectation for God to speak. And like, I think you just said it. It's like sometimes when you hear the prophetic word of knowledge, all that stuff, you might have a bad connotation towards it. But the Bible says, my sheep hear my voice and follow me. So that means that we hear the voice of God through the word. And then we could also hear not only the logos, the written, right, but the rhema, the spoken. And it's stepping out and being normal and natural. And so what happened was he went up and we had some worship, and then I was sensing something, but right before I went up, another friend of ours, Pastor Daniel from Hope City, he gave me a word like Adam and I were joking and made me cry, and then actually made me cry on the mic when I was sharing, which was fantastic. That's always great.
Sammy was.
I was losing it.
Lip quiver.
Oh, I was losing it.
But if cut sleeve shirt.
Oh yeah. I was rocking the Patriot tank top, weeping. But it was so good
And then
because
I turn around, I see Jeff also.
Oh, bro, Jeff Osborne is gone.
man.
Jeff
He
was
got Julian's over his head, put his hand on his
100%.
a
head.
red cup on.
Oh, yeah.
He was holding a red cup.
the red Solo with
water.
sparkling
It was
water in
It
it.
was sparkling water.
Julian starts making his rounds during worship.
Oh, yeah, he does.
And Julian's just coming up,
sniping
for
people.
those watching on video, like what he would do is like if someone was worshiping Julian Lowe, who's been on this before, he comes up to someone and he'll be like, you know. But within 30 seconds,
They're
that
crying.
person
You're
starts like
weeping.
ugly crying.
Oh yeah.
So I become his
100%.
hostess. With
Yeah.
I was about to say,
I start
You're like
carrying
you're the catcher. The catcher.
because I started following him with the tissues.
100%.
So I became the tissue person. So I'd be like, Jeff's over there, tissue here, and then he goes to the next person, and I'm like, oh, tissues. He
Just
goes over
act-
to Sammy, and like
That's
tissues.
right. So what was cool about it? So I had to work for the room and share just really about our goal is we want to love Jesus like our first encounter with God. We don't want that to plateau us. We want that to grow us. And then I felt two words for two different individuals in the room. One of those words we felt to pray for Julian. And sometimes when again, we call it operating the spirit. It's the supernatural is super space natural, right? Like you don't have to make it weird. You can make it, super simple and easy. And so I felt like Will was going to have a word. So I was like, Will, come pray for Julian. And then
Will looks over at me, he goes, I have a word.
So
But he was just thinking about it.
Exactly.
And then Sammy goes, I think, mind you, there's 70 people in the room.
Yeah.
So Sammy's like, hey, I think Will has a word for you, Julian. And Will looked over at me. He's like, I literally just got a word for Julian.
I was like, Sammy
He's
on
like,
right now.
He's
And
on
before
another
we
planet right now.
before we prayed for you,
Yeah.
I remember thinking the whole retreat, we got to have a moment where we pray for Sammy.
Yeah.
And then Groves grabs a mic, and I was like, I'm going to pray for Sammy. But Groves grabs it and says, we got to pray for Sammy.
Yeah.
So there's like things happening in the spirit,
Yeah.
and God is speaking to all of us simultaneously, unbeknownst to us.
That's right.
Yeah.
So there brings a confidence
Yeah.
when you sense like, oh, I'm not tripping.
Yeah.
Like there's 2 to 3 witnesses here. We're all
100%.
sensing the same thing.
So we pray for Julian, and we just feel. We all Julian's a brother.
Yeah.
So we just believe in his calling, believe in Oasis Church. We
He's
believe
very prophetic.
very prophetic. Here's God, and so pray for him, and then I'll give it to Will, whatever you said to Julian. But then Julian gets ready to go off on Adam like crazy. There's levels. There's levels
for like
to
15
it.
minutes.
Yeah, it was
He wrote
crazy.
like an autobiography.
Yeah,
dog. That's what he did.
Yeah. So
Because everyone was like prophet praying, like they were
Yeah.
prophesying while they praying.
Yep.
And then like Julian didn't, like he didn't pray yet. He just for 15 minutes, I was sitting down and he just like 15 minutes just went in on me and
Yeah.
then prayed and
Yep.
then everyone else came in with some words
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the cool things is, and we could say this, when we met Adam, we met him together at this retreat, what, 4 years ago?
Almost. Yeah.
And Will and I both together, we were like, that dude's built different. Adam is built different. But Adam didn't come in like, hey, this is who I am.
I didn't know anyone at
yeah.
that retreat at the time.
And-
I knew Julian loosely. We had only one conversation at an art conference,
Yeah.
passing by each other.
Right.
And so I loosely knew Julian.
Right.
And then I knew no one else
Yep.
in the
Crazy.
room. Yeah.
But even though with your history in ministry, with the Lord, all the stuff, you could have come in there and flex on the room. You just came in to be a part of it. And so that built our friendship up,
Yeah.
friendship up. And then speed up to 4 years later, Julian speaking to you, and Julian just speaking into your season and really just saying, you're called for this. Wherever your feet, I'll say a few things, and then whatever you remember too is wherever your feet go, the Lord's going to give you that. Really about stewarding even this region, and not only the Inland Empire, but across LA. He talked about campuses up in Northern California. He talked about I remember.
He said Oakland. He said Atlanta.
He said Atlanta.
He said wherever you have done the kind of the most work of ministry over your years, God
Yeah.
has a campus for you
Yep.
over there. I mean, that's essentially what he said. And mind you, he didn't. A lot of the stuff he was saying, he had no idea.
Exactly.
Like certain things were in motion. You
Yeah,
know?
I remember him saying, like, those who have done you wrong, you're going to bring them to a table.
Yeah.
And you're gonna show them in many ways, like Joseph, what the enemy used for evil, God will use for good. Talked about so many incredible things of what you're entering into without knowing, like
Yeah.
you said, all these things that have been happening to you for the past few months.
Yeah.
He spoke a word in season that was a game changer.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know how much detail we want to go because he
Go
was.
ahead. I
he
mean,
like-
you can share it. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
right.
Yeah, that's
I'll-
what- yeah.
share whatever he said, and then I'll give on the back end what was like
Happening
pure,
real time.
like in real time.
Okay.
Yeah.
What he didn't know what was happening within a week.
Yeah.
There's other things that when you name it, I won't say this is actually happening or
Okay.
not, but
Okay.
I will on the back end. I'll
Yeah.
edit it on the back end.
No, I just remember first thing he said was God's going to prepare a table for you in the presence of your enemies.
Yep.
And he said, you have a lot of enemies coming around you right now, but the Lord is calling you to bless them,
Yeah.
to create a table for them.
Yep.
And then he said, wherever your feet goes.
And he was speaking of like maybe other pastors who
Yeah.
you know
Yep.
who maybe have some jealousy or
Yep.
maybe duplicating things we're doing but not wanting to build a relationship with us and you know and we're at a place where he's like it could start to become an animosity because you may be going to cities that people be maybe you know angry about or whatever and so he issued that challenge of you know you gotta start hosting lunches for pastors to hear from you.
Yeah, maybe
your
like
heart,
maybe
build-
like
build
some
bridges.
maybe like some pop-ups, maybe in Houston. Hey. Hey, I just-
Yeah. And then he talked. I remember one part he said the name of Patria is actually not the name of your church.
Oh yeah.
The prophetic moment was it's actually the name of your network.
Yep.
Yeah,
And he was calling you higher.
Yeah.
Right? That God's calling, at least how I heard it,
yeah. That's
Yep.
how he said. Yeah,
was
that's what he
that
said.
your calling is pretty much to the kingdom of God
Yeah.
and not just the local church, right? And he was calling you to keep that in your forefront, to know
Yeah.
that there's a network that's coming with this stewardship in this transition. I remember that.
Oh, he said L.A. He specifically
Yeah.
said you're coming to L.A.
He said you have. So he said
and he said I'm
God's
welcoming.
gonna-
Didn't he say I'm welcoming you in or something like
Yeah,
that?
because Julian's in LA. So
Yeah.
he said where you put your feet, God has called you. And what's crazy is 3 years ago we were going to do a campus in Texas, specifically Killeen, and I had verbatim said I have to put my feet on the soil to see if we're really led there.
Oh,
Wow.
that's crazy.
That's crazy.
And I went there twice, and by the end of it, I felt God tell me, "You're not meant to be here in this specific city, Killeen." And so, it like when people ask me, "Hey,
Yeah.
I heard a rumor you guys were maybe going to Texas. Why don't you?" My actual literal answer every time is, "I put my feet on the soil, and God didn't give me peace."
Wow.
That was the answer. Everything in theory felt right, but the moment I went to that city
Yep,
after
yep.
2 visits,
Yep, you
God
didn't feel
said,
peace.
God said, "This isn't it." So
Yep.
so now I have this theory that, and Julian, I've never talked about this with him. I literally have a personal theory that I do not believe God gives us that city until I go visit that city.
I'm in 100% agreement
And
with that.
so, and that's like that's a personal thing. I
Yep.
think God gave me. I don't think that's what everyone else is supposed to do.
Right.
If someone is going to take a job in Atlanta, I don't feel like you have to go to Atlanta first and feel. But that is what I have felt compelled
Yeah.
to. So when
Yeah.
Julian says, everywhere you have put your feet in that city, that you have spent a lot of time in those regions,
Yeah.
God's giving you those regions
Yeah.
because of you've been there, you put feet on that soil. I'm just like, that's literally my
That's crazy.
that's literally my philosophy of church planning. It's like if I
crazy.
feel I've spent foot city in Corona, like I've did, there's another campus that I can't share yet that we're thinking about doing.
Yep.
And I have spent time in that city in that area for over a decade.
Yep.
That I have always felt drawn to, but I always felt I was drawn for other friends or other people. And then Julian said,
Yep.
but of all things, you have had a heart for LA.
Yeah.
Which we have.
Yeah.
And he said, God's taking you there, so don't worry. And then he said, and I welcome you in that city. And because that always has always been a fear to me, because
Right.
I really respect Julian and I really respect Chad. I have two relationships
Yep.
with really close relationships with them. And I never want a friend to feel like, even though these cities are huge,
Yeah,
you just
for
never
sure.
want a friend
For
to feel
sure.
like you're encroaching on
Right.
their region.
Yep.
So for him to be like, and I've always thought, if we ever felt led to go in that region, how would I talk to Julian?
Right.
How would I? And Julian just is joining our board for our church too. So
Yeah.
he just said yes to that. And so, I'm just trying to do things with respect. So when he just publicly says, you have a heart for there and I welcome you there, it was like, well, that's been an answer to prayer.
It's crazy.
All I really wanted is you as a friend to be like, you're good to come.
Yeah.
You know, we'd be far away, but
for
it
sure.
still matters to have a friend
being welcomed
in a
in
region
by
you
a
know.
gatekeeper too of a city. Spiritual gatekeeper is huge.
So
Which is, yeah.
what about that moment made you cry? Was it when you felt like, oh, God sees me?
No, no. So he said a few other things.
Yeah, can we share some of the details of that?
Yeah, whatever I'm missing,
Well,
tell me.
I mean, again, if we have to cut this out, and then you won't even hear it. But I remember him mentioning like people are trying to even sue you.
Yeah. So he said there are people who will be trying to sue you because they want your money. They want money from you.
Yep.
And 3 days prior, I had gotten a letter that because I had gotten in a car accident in December that someone else caused, but I'm getting the blame for because the person ran away, and so I was the person that stayed on scene with 4 other cars.
Yeah.
So the insurance companies deemed that I'm responsible for everybody's.
Crazy.
And I basically got a letter that said, "Hey, we've hit all of our claims. From here on out, you may be personally liable because there's still an excess of $200,000 that is being fought for medical and damages, and and so basically it was we're going to start a litigation procedure to try to cover you, but we may not. You may be personally liable for some things." I got that within 3 days of going to Young Guns, and I had already told myself, like, I'm going to go to Young, I'm not going to worry about it. I got so much going on. I'm not going to let this stress overtake me, because I start stressing and,
For sure.
you know, and everything like that. And so, you know, told my wife saw it, and she's like, because when the accident happened, everybody denied an ambulance. No, you know, everybody said they were fine when we were there. The police came and checked on everyone. You know, everyone said they were good. Some cars were minimally damaged. And then now, you know, people are having surgeries and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, oh my gosh, like what is going on? So, and, you know, so Julian gives that, hey, you know, people are trying to sue you to come after your money. And I'm there, and I'm like, I just got a letter 3 days ago, and he's like, and you're gonna be okay.
And what's crazy is
God's
it's
got
like
you.
the feet on the ground and the suing thing. Those are both real time things, which gives
Real affirmations,
which gives like trust in the word. We already have trust because we trust Julian, but also trust. Obviously, you always weigh every word to make sure it's right. And even if we don't understand it, we call this, you know, the metaphorically you shelf it. You go, okay, we'll shelf it, and we're not going to try and move our life in that. But him giving those words is like, wow, he's in a flow of really giving you something accurate, a word that you need in season. Yeah,
and it was like, and so there were some things that have not come to fruition.
Yep.
And have just been prayers. So then you're thinking to yourself, if you get a word like, is that even going to happen? Is he even really hearing God?
Right.
But the other half is what I'm experiencing in the moment, and he's naming it like to a T. So then I'm like, I have to believe.
Yep.
Because he's telling me this stuff like, you got to hold lunches for pastors. Yeah. You got to welcome him into your tribe. Patria is named family for a reason.
Yep.
You're meant to extend a family, you know, friendship hand to churches to bring them into your family. You're going to unify churches and blah, blah, blah. And so there's a side like, I'm not holding lunches.
Right.
And he said there's going to be sometimes you're going to hold a lunch and no one's going to show up.
Yep.
And you still have to sit at that lunch.
Yep.
And I'm just like, you know, naturally be like,
nah,
I'm not doing that.
Yep.
But then he goes, you're going to be sued. He either said you're going to be sued or you are being sued. He said something and it was just like, I am.
Yes.
I am in litigation. Like, no one would know that except my wife. You know? So
Crazy.
It's like, I'm like, what? Like, okay. No one would know that, you know? And so he goes, and then he goes into, and then he mentions feet on the soil, which is like a literal value of church multi-site planning for me that no one would know. That's not, we're in the church world. So that is never a common thing ever talked about. No one ever talks about foot on a soil for church planting, go there, experiencing it, blah, blah, blah. So that's not like, you can't say like, oh, well, people who church plant always say that.
Yeah.
No, they don't.
No.
They look at data. They look at where families are moving. They
Yep.
look at pieces of paper first, you know.
Right.
And they look at median incomes and all that stuff like that for a lot of these things. So that's not a very common so then Julian saying that is like, oh my gosh, you know. So he says that, and then he says, so now. He said, okay, let's pray for him. Has one crying yet? I was just like, at that point, I was just taking everything in. God was affirming certain things. being challenged on other things. You know, because he kind of said, regardless of, he says something around, I think it was somewhere around 8, regardless of your age, you know, you're stepping into a calling, not only network, but multi-sites and blah, 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 which a bunch of the guys were already calling me bishop, but then that just affirmed as a humorous joint, like, okay, that's Adam's nickname. He's the bishop. Like,
Rabbi's gone.
This is, Rabbi's gone.
You could only call him that if you're grafted in from the beginning. That's that's a grafted in.
That's a grafted in.
That's a grandfathered in. You know what I mean?
So then at that point, it's like, okay, everybody's like, oh yeah, you know, oh, that's Bishop. Other people who know me, Will, Sammy, others in there. Jeff Osborne's in that room. Couple other friends. Kevin's in that room, and just guys we know. We're really close. Probably a third of that room. Who know me, and then they're just like, yes, yeah, I know Adam. Yes, 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 yeah. Like everybody's affirming that in that way, and then so everyone starts praying for me. And then the part that got me as Will was praying, or not Will, as Julian was praying, was because there's always this fear. My dad has publicly talked about it, that, you know, he basically he forsake his family for the call.
Yeah, so I was,
you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that is always like my fear is that my kids and my wife will experience what my mom and what we did for the sake of growing the church and growing a movement. And for lack of a better term, like what Julian is saying is bigger than our one city. So in some ways it's more work than
for sure.
even what we've already done as a church. So that's always in the back of my mind. And so as he was praying, he said something to the degree like, Ashley's unsure.
Oh yeah.
I was going to say that I remember him mentioning Ashley.
He starts talking about Ashley, and then he starts talking about Matthias and Thomas. He's like, they're going to be okay. They're going to be okay. They're not going to lose their relationship with the Lord. They're going to love you. You're not going to lose them, and God's going to give Ashley clarity. She's shrugging her shoulders right now, saying, "I don't know, God. I don't know if we want this. I don't know." And so that's what made me like start to cry, because that week. She was actually annoyed with me that I was leaving, and because I had been gone, and then this week, so that happened 2 weeks ago. This week I was in Dallas sharing at Carrie Newhoff event. So Ashley was just like, Adam, and these are all genuine things that are building our church, that are building this call, this network call that we feel led to do as a church. And so a lot of these spaces I'm representing like our generation in terms of what, almost like, hey, look, things are possible for this next generation.
Right.
Adam, speak to it. Help us put some words to it. So I feel very led to it, while my wife is going like, man, like, there's a lot of, I'm here with the kids.
A lot of sacrifice.
Like this. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And what I didn't know was like, well, actually what happened was the night before, and I shared it with my church, the night before that, she had messaged me because in one of our podcasts, I made a very, she heard it different for the first time, and I could do it what I didn't do in the sermon because I have more time in this podcast, is I made a very generic statement where I said, I was talking about LGBT community within our church doing a live Beyond the Letter night. And basically one of the elements that I shared was, many people in the LGBT community will say, it's nice that you get to marry someone and you don't have to struggle, but you tell me if I'm a Christian and I'm LGBTQ, I have to be abstinent. And, so you get it easy, I get it hard. And then I basically say, well, commonly my response is, it's even though it seems easier, it's not. Every day I'm challenged.
Right.
Every day my flesh is challenged by women. Every single day I have to make a decision. My flesh doesn't want to be a one-woman man. My flesh wants every woman that I find attractive, any woman that gives me the time of day. My flesh will be like, yes, Adam, yes, be affirmed, yes, that's beautiful. I have to make a decision to love my wife every single day. Now, that's something we hear in church everywhere. That's something pastors, theologians, everyone talks about when it talks about the theology of sexuality and everything like that. Ashley just heard it different that day. I've said it before.
Right.
She just heard it different that day. And so she's like, Adam, is not satisfied with me again.
Yeah.
And I always share in my book that'll come out hopefully at the top of next year, but we've shared it publicly before, is in 2020, I had sent her a message saying, hey, our lack of intimacy is going to lead me to a dangerous place unless you and I get on the same page. And so she immediately was like, oh, he's feeling that way again.
Yeah.
And I was like, but I wasn't.
Right.
I was just trying to.
You're just making a truth. You're just making a truth.
Yeah, I'm thinking I'm doing what I always do, you know? And so then the night before this event, Ashley texted me at 2 a.m. and was just like, I was so hurt when you said that. It was so embarrassing for me. You know, how are you checking out women? How are you struggled this much? And I was just like, oh my gosh.
I feel totally misunderstood because you're doing the opposite.
I was doing the total.
Yeah, for sure.
And she's heard it before.
For sure.
But whatever she was feeling in that moment when she heard it, and then what she harbored it for about 5 days, like her and I weren't really talking. And I thought she was mad that I was going to Young Guns.
Yeah.
And so you just, as a husband, you just go, I'll deal with it when I come back.
Yeah, for sure.
There's nothing I can do, you know? So you're just like, okay, and so I just think she's annoyed by that. So then she messages me literally the night before. And I'm like, oh my gosh, babe, no, I've said this before. I've said it like this. And I'm not literally saying I struggle every day. What I'm saying is if I wanted to embrace that struggle, if I wanted to embrace that level of my flesh, I'm a Christian man. I spend time in the Spirit.
Right.
So my ability to say no is stronger.
Yep.
But if I wasn't,
Yep.
if I wasn't spending time in worship, if I wasn't spending, I'm no different than a Christian man to a non-Christian man in the sense of the struggle.
Right.
The only reason why I have strength is because I built my inner man up. But what I'm trying to do, babe, is relate to the person who is LGBTQ, to look at another side.
You're
of
not
the
saying
coin,
you're in the
be-
struggle right now. You're saying you would be if you didn't. Yeah, exactly.
And I could be at any point.
Totally.
I'm not naive enough.
Right.
You know, they always say, like, never say that it'd be impossible for you to cheat. Because if you did
100%.
that, then that's when you end up doing it.
100%.
You embrace the possibility that like, okay, a few fights or a few dry seasons with my wife could lead me to something stupid. Therefore, it's like the Apostle Paul says, like, when I want to do good, I don't do good.
Right.
You know, it's like, but when I embrace the fact that I'm a piece of crap, according to the word of God, then that's where God fills in. So I'm texting her like, I'm so ashamed. I'm so sorry I made you feel that way. I've never heard that from her since really since we started we were married, when she dealt with a lot of jealousy stuff. So it's been about 9 years since I've heard her articulate, probably 8 years since I've heard her articulate, I'm jealous. You made me feel less than, blah, blah. And I'm just like, so I feel horrible. We talk about it that night. It ends with, she's like, Ashley can bounce back pretty fast. So she's like, I'm good. I misunderstood you.
Yeah.
Thank you for telling me. If you were, because she was kind of prepared to be like, so if you are struggling, what do you need from me? Like, what do we got to do?
Yep.
Do we need to go sit with our accountability? So she was like wanting to move towards a positive direction, but she was upset.
Totally.
So then I go 24 hours later, Julian's like, Ashley's going to be okay this season. Because it's just the stress of the season that led her
100%.
to feel that way, because she's looking at the calendar. She sees all the times I'm going to be gone. She's, we're counseling couples that are dealing with affairs and divorce and blah, blah. And so that stuff's,
subconsciously she's
in.
hearing it, or consciously, but subconsciously she's thinking of it.
Yeah.
And then that just,
she starts self-fulfilled prophesying it, right?
And it triggers. And what's funny too is it's right before a trip too. How much of the time does that happen right the night before? And here's the crazy thing is that, like, you could have been like, oh, hang on, let me stay. You figured it out. But if you would have stayed, you would have missed a word
for sure
of what you're going to go into.
Yeah.
Which is a crazy
would have
thought.
missed the whole. And so in that moment when Julian's like, and so then so we start talking about that. We figured that out. And then ultimately the conversation goes, she just says, like, this is a lot right now. Just God's doing a lot. It's like, she's like, it's just, we can't go anymore where nobody knows us. You're traveling a lot. You're helping build the kingdom a lot. You're preaching a lot. It's like, so she just kind of, and it bled kind of from when we do a vacation with our accountability couples once a year. And we spend time confessing and sharing where we're weak or whatever. And so she had already had a moment 3 weeks prior on our trip with our accountability where she expressed she's overwhelmed. She's like, I went from Pastor Adam's wife to like now, like people know who I am and people expect things of me and I'm supposed to have all these answers. And she's like, Adam like I was good with my husband being that guy, but like now I'm
Sure, by association.
with him on it, and we're doing the
she has her own
podcast.
gifts, and she's building too.
So she kind of had a mental breakdown
makes sense.
on the trip of just going
Makes
like,
sense.
I don't know. So I'm taking all that into Young Guns, not even during that weekend thinking that I need some type of clarity, because
Right.
I'm a very like
do it.
like God's got it.
Yeah,
you know,
for
we're
sure.
in His will.
For
We'll be
sure.
all right. I
Yeah.
just
We
kind
have
of
a high threshold for
yeah,
stress.
yeah. So I'm just like, it's not on my mind. The lawsuit thing, little on my mind. What's really on my mind though is
family.
like that's constantly on my
Always,
mind. And then
always.
what's constantly on my mind is this pull that I know God has for me.
Yeah.
But I don't want to offend anyone.
Totally.
I don't want anyone to not like me.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't want a pastor to talk about me.
Right.
I don't want another pastor to think that I'm encroaching on his space. So that insecurity, that's a daily insecurity. And here's Julian saying, yeah, there are people who are pissed about what you're doing.
And you're like, I
And you
knew
need-
it.
I knew it. Yeah, right.
Haters.
And he's like, and you're supposed to invite them to lunch
Yeah.
with all of them and extend grace. And I'm just like, no.
Yeah.
Some of these guys are like 10, 15, 20 years older than me. I'm
Right.
not doing that.
Right,
You know,
right.
like they need to have me
Yeah,
for lunch.
it's so
like, you
anti
know,
our
like-
way.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
our selfish way is like, nah,
Yeah.
like it's mafia. Like you,
Yeah.
you dead to me. Nah,
Like, what
it's
do you
not
mean?
gonna. Yeah,
They need to reach out to us.
Exactly.
They need to, you know, so what made me start crying is the moment he got to Ashley, man, she's struggling and she's unsure. He said whatever he said in that moment, like
Yeah.
she's unsure. He said a specific word that was like literally what I felt for her feelings were in the past couple weeks was like kind of this just like she knows that's where all this is headed that way, but
Yeah.
she's unsure whether she wants to be a part of it. It's something like that. And he goes, God's got her. She's in the game. She has to go through this. And your boys are going to be okay.
Yep.
You're not going to lose
Yep.
them with all of this. You're
Yep.
not and then that's really what started making me cry, because that's the actual fear.
For sure.
Yep.
The fear is, do I get to a mountaintop and I look to my left and right and my sons and my wife aren't there. And they stopped in the middle and they were like, forget that
Right,
guy.
right, right.
Let Moses go to the mountain, but we're melting our gold
and
earrings.
that's
You know,
a
like-
real fear. Like there's some fears that are unrealistic, but we're still afraid. And we
Yeah.
have anxiety and stress. There's some fears that you've experienced, right? Where you're like, you've experienced. We say this line where we say, don't sacrifice your family on the altar of ministry.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times that happens though. So for you, like you just opened, that happened to your mom, to your brothers, to you. So you don't want to do that. But at the same time, our fear of something happening to us could hold us back from what the grace that God's called us to walk in.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
you said, I remember Julian saying, you know, Ashley's gonna be okay. Your boys are gonna be okay. They're gonna go through. They're gonna get through it, because your heart is, I want to do it together. There will be a grace.
Yeah.
The seasons will ebb and flow, but there will be a grace to build as you're supposed to build,
Yeah.
which is profound.
And most people were brought to the front when they got a word, but
Yeah.
because Julian just kind of, he brought it out like a ninja. I was sitting down
You
because
were,
I
I
was.
remember.
Just
We
chilling.
had just prayed for everyone,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so what's this gonna do? So we were just praying for everyone. Rooster, go to bed. Go to bed. Go to bed.
That's Rooster over there.
Yeah. That's
Special guest appearance.
the mascot. So yeah, like everyone had been brought to the front, but it was like almost towards the tail end, and Julian was almost with the poise of like, yeah, I'm not done yet. So
Yeah.
I'm sitting down because I'm helping Julian I'm passing out tissues for him. I'm back in Sammy. I opened the night, but then me and Will aren't technically, and if I'm speaking for you, tell me I am, but like you and I aren't technically the spiritual guys. You
I'm
guys
not
are
the
more
prophetic type.
me and you are more the head guys.
Yeah, for
So
sure,
so
for sure.
you know, we
That's
more
why when
live,
Simon said, "Will got a word," I'm like, "Oh, I do got a word.
Yeah,
Maybe,
yeah.
maybe I do."
which is out of the ordinary for me and you both,
Yeah, for
because
sure.
you and I mostly live in the head.
Yeah.
Sammy and Julian live in the heart, which is great. That's why we make a great team.
Sure.
Jeff lives in all those spaces, you know, so he can go back and forth. But so that's why for me, I'm just there. I open it and I'm like, I'm there to support. I know once Sammy and Julian start doing their thing, I'm gonna back up. We're gonna bring leadership to it, and that's it. So for me, I'm just viewing things as a support passing out tissue. Me and Daniel are back there running audio. you know, like we're just there. And mind you, there's 70 pastors in the room, but that's us. There's a reason why we believe we're knitted to each other because we view the same way. So we're just there. In many ways, we're viewing it. We're just here to serve and serve as a moment. But I think it was beautiful that God turned it to be like, you guys are always serving in the moment. Like the Spirit wants to spend some time ministering to you because normally we aren't the ones getting ministry, even in those spaces.
I was like,
we're the ones handing
I was like,
it.
hey, somebody pick me, man. I know. I was like, all my dogs are getting
Everyone got hit.
Like, what about my word, dog? Dude, I got so many thoughts about that. Like, just to like put some like commentary to it about like the prophetic, because people are listening.
Give us some head.
Yeah, so I was thinking like, I don't know, I forget which author said this, but they said there's 3 steps to the prophetic. There's revelation, interpretation, and application. Right? When we say revelation, we're not talking about the inspired word of God.
Yeah.
But prophecy is when God brings to mind spontaneously the will and purpose of God. But there's steps to it. First is like a revelation, right? For Apostle John, he sees an image, right? He sees or he hears thunders of voices. And so this revelation drops. And then I think to myself, okay, what's the interpretation, right? Daniel has dreams or Potiphar has dreams. So you're like, okay, I have this revelation. What's the interpretation? And then the gift of wisdom comes in. Now, what's the application, right? And as I was hearing these prophetic words, there's a revelation that drops, right? And as Julian or you're seeing it, now the interpretation's happening from the one who's receiving it, because Julian doesn't know how this is being interpreted to you.
Yeah.
But to you guys, it's oh my God, this is like the Lord is literally speaking to me. And now the application is for the one who receives it. How am I going to apply this into my life? And another thing I like to say is when it comes to like the will of God, I've said this before and I've said this a lot. There's God's will, God's whens, and God's ways, right? The will of God was for David to be king. That was a prophetic word. Nobody thought ever that the youngest child is going to be king when there's already a king. Now that's God's will. Now God's when was 15 years later, right? So you have all these words in your spirit and your heart from years ago, but just because
there is one more. I'm going to come back to it after. He did have one more that I just remembered.
And so the when is like, oh, maybe I heard incorrectly. But the when is like some things just take time. But now the ways is through 15 years of crushing, betrayal, heartache, and pains. I even heard you saying, you could get to this later, you said after that prophetic word, my life just been horrible, right? Because you'll see that. Oftentimes God gives you a word, so he tells that Moses and the Israelites, I'm going to deliver you. And right after that, the opposition just multiplies exponentially, right? He's like, oh, y'all wanted to build.
David's got Saul running after him and trying to kill him. He's just like,
and so like, so I always say like, whenever I get a prophetic, 2 things I always get alert. Whenever I get a prophetic word that is like, oh, I know it's the Lord. Or when there's so much favor and expansion, over the years I've learned I got to be on most alert. It reminds me of Apostle Paul says, be most alert after you preach so that you don't disqualify yourself. Right? Because after God's used you, now you have the football and the enemy is going to try to tackle you. So whenever I get a prophetic word now, in the past I used to get all hype. Now I get super sober. I'm like, oh my.
You're like, look around. And what's crazy is I got to, like, again, so same way that you were sitting down, I was getting ready to step up to kind of help steward the room right after you shared. And I was sitting and Daniel grabbed the mic out of nowhere. And like you said, we're usually stewarding the room. Will and I have done this so many times. But you're not ready to get the word. So I'm sitting down, he gives me that word. And that's what like was a word in season, needed it. And like I said, the tire almost flew off after, like you just said, is the truth. And I think also like what you're saying is sometimes, I mean, people listening right now, you want to activate the prophetic, right? You want to activate, hearing God's voice and stepping out and sharing. A lot of times what happens is we lean where it's like Old Testament prophecy was a different view. So like if you weren't accurate on every single one, if you were off once, you get stoned, right? So New Testament prophecies for edification, upbuilding, right, and lifting up. And it's all through the speed of trust and relationship. So a lot of times prophetic people, or you hear a word and they give a word to a pastor they have zero relationship with. That's
and their word is more likened to the Old Testament than it is the New Testament, which that's how you know they're probably off.
Exactly, and it's not, and it's a correctional word versus an like edification and building up of a word. Exactly, and so I think that part of it is like it's through the speed of trust. There are moments for correctional words, but it would be like a relationship I have with Will or Adam. If they see something, there's trust. They could say, hey, I'm seeing this. Weigh it, but this is what I believe. There's a trust built in that I value their voices. So in the same way that you're hearing what we were doing, is that start building up the edification, start building up, encouraging, lifting someone up. We want to have people leave better than they came in. It doesn't mean there can't be a correctional word or breakthrough word, but so much of the time we're like, oh, I want to give a prophetic word to a whether it be a political person, whether it be a celebrity, whether it be a pastor, whatever it is, and we want to give correction, but we have no voice into their life. That's not going to work. But if there is voice and trust into this room like we had, then we're able to give this word and we're able to weigh it because there's actually real-time words that are happening. Just like you said, there was the suing, there was the feet on the ground, which and there was the moment with your family. So there's 3 moments.
Well, and there was a fourth. I remembered it was, and then there was my team, because not just my team, but also other people, but specifically our team here at Patriot, because he said, God gives you visions of the future, and he gives you time to process them. But when you release those visions, people seem to reject it or not catch on. And he goes, it's not because they don't want it. It's not because God's not going to do it. It's because they haven't had just enough time as you have to ruminate and process the vision. So he said, don't be discouraged that when you present your direction for your church or your team or your people, that they don't catch it right away, and you think it's not God, but it's just because you've been given the vision, you've sat on it, you've simmered it, you've processed it, and he goes, just give them time and they will understand. They will see it and it'll get where God is taking it to go, which I was also in that space also too.
I remember when he said that, I was like, dang, because I know some of the things you're going through.
And so you know, Sammy knows, because we talk about, you're in a lot of, you got a lot of guys, a lot of ways you guys are my peers in ministry where I can process some of my senior leadership frustration of hey, I don't know if we should be doing this. We shouldn't, whatever. And so, you know, some of those things, or even team stuff. And man, I'm struggling with team things. So when he said that, that was another affirmation. So that's where I'm saying it was like, after I got the word, it felt like I was in, things went all downhill, but they're good rebuilding moments that I see the Lord is in, but it's not making me happy. It doesn't bring me joy, but it gives me peace, as I'm in the moment. I'm like, I hate this, some other things have happened since that I'm just like, this is terrible.
Man, I have so many thoughts. I know Gabe has thoughts too, but they don't teach us that master
seminar. It's super helpful the way that this is all being framed and thought about, because even before I even came to what was then Abundant Living Family Church, I grew up my whole life in a Spanish Pentecostal church, and there was just crazy abuses in that church. And so, I mean, not with me as a child, but like my father and my mom, and like prophetic words going out, and, like it's candy. And you're saying like religious and spiritual abuse, not
because people could take prophetic
abuse.
words.
Not physical. Not physical. But like prophetic words going out, like it's Halloween with candy and this, but like literally that Old Testament stuff. You're gonna get this. This is you're gonna have this specific thing and stuff. And it was getting to the point, because that's where both of my grandparents pastored Pentecostal Spanish churches, and so that's just been their whole world, both of my parents. And so I grew up in that environment. And it just started getting so bad, but also I don't speak Spanish, so I never really got there was never a word for me in my language.
There was a lot of correction. You just didn't understand it. You're like, amen.
I was like, anybody got the gift of tongues?
I need a translation over here.
No, that would never happen. And so I ultimately was like, you know what, I was like 16, and I was like, I gotta go to a church where I know what's going on. Like, I know what's being said. And so then I came to this church, and then it was getting so bad for my parents. They're like, no, we have to leave too. We got to get out of here. And these are just not happening. And so for me, coming out of that environment, what was helpful was coming into this environment where everything seemed more level and everything seemed to be taken with so much care, like what you were talking about, Will. Like, after you feel like you have a prophetic word, you don't feel like, all right, let's go, let's get the next one. You're like, uh-oh, like this is scary. This is something weighted on me. And so what would you say to somebody who's kind of in that situation where they've just seen so many abuses of the gifts in those ways? Is it a matter of kind of what happened to me, getting in an environment where they have more of a level-headed view of these gifts and are using them well, not to, just use it in an Old Testament way, but using it in the true New Testament way and how it's outlined.
Well, I feel like everyone takes everything to the extreme, especially when they're like insecure and they don't know how to like have an integrated life. Right. So for me, the aim is not prophetic words, it's an integrated faith.
Yeah,
so for example, there's just people, they're conference hoppers or like prophetic word hoppers, they're prophet hoppers, they're seeking prophets all the time. They need counseling. You don't need a prophetic word. Does that make sense? Like what you need is a local church, Bible study, groundedness, and like therapy, right? Because you're seeking a void by escaping to finding the next word or next direction. There are other people, they're maybe more like me and Adam. They don't really think about those things. They're just chucking along. They're like, I'll figure all this out. They need to be more open to the prophetic word. They need to be open to the spontaneous, right? So I think it's just having a holistic approach to spiritual things. And I've also realized in the context of revelation, interpretation, and application, like different people are like gifted a little more in those three different areas.
Yeah.
Right?
Good.
I'm actually more gifted in the application. So for example, even the Old Testament, every king had a prophet. Right? Kings were builders, right? They established, but God always brought prophets to give them direction. So the prophet would have like a revelation, right? But it was the king that did the application. So in my life, I've always had like 2 to 3 of those just super spiritual people. Those people who were like just texting me all these words. When I was younger, I would take their word as if it was, I had to do it. Now when they give me a word, I go, I think they might have heard from the Lord, but they don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
The boundary and the authority God has given me is to steward what this means for the church and for my life. So they might say like, oh, Pastor, I got a word from the Lord that this person has this spirit and you got to be careful with that. Right. In the past, I'd have been, that person's out of my life.
Right.
Now I go, okay. Oh, I think they're right. Now let me sit on this. Now let me see how I shepherd this person they're talking about. How do I position this person in the application of that word? So I think it's just understanding like you have different gifts. And also for the person who's prophetic, know that it's not your part to tell what the senior pastor to do, or it's not your part to tell what someone to do with their life. You may have received the word, so you got the revelation, and if that's all you got, leave it there. So for example, I know some people, they go like, hey, they got the word, they got an image. They got an impression. And what you should say if you don't have the interpretation, Russo got a word.
Yeah, he did.
He got a word.
Hallelujah.
There's a spirit in this word. There's a spirit in this room. Right?
Hallelujah.
So I tell people this: if you receive a word, go to someone and say, "Hey, I see like this storm in your house, and I see like this rain falling, and then that's all you got." Don't then go like,
don't try and interpret.
Don't interpret. And this is what you're supposed to say. Does that mean anything to you? And you leave it there. Then that person's like, actually,
it does,
my finances are falling apart and it's hindering our marriage. Instead of you might have been like, your job, you lost your job and you missed them there. They're like, no, I never lost my job. There's a storm though. But so the interpretation was missed. And that's what happened.
Or they're thinking these last rains did water damage to my roof. Like that's spot on. But then they say, I think it might be your son. Who they know is maybe wayward or something. And they're like, no, my son's been coming to church now. They just disregard you as a whole for good now.
Or they'll start saying like, and the Lord is telling you to do this. No. So you just got to know like, okay, what is the Lord showing me? And say as much as He's shown me, and leave what He hasn't. Quite, and that's okay. And then seek wisdom in how you apply that. So those are just immediate thoughts. I mean, this guy's the prophet. So
no. So what's funny is the guy. So with Circuit Riders, the group that I worked with, helped starting up. My buddy who I built a lot of everything with, he's like, and his mom too, capital, like almost P, like real deal operates in the prophetic. For me, I would say I'm a builder, like I think multiplication and then evangelistic, but then I've learned to grow that muscle. So like anything spiritual is a muscle. So I've learned to grow in the prophetic so that when I get in these rooms, if there's a need for that, all of us, like I saw like Adam, like he said, he might not operate that, but I saw him opening the room and creating space and then also giving out words. So you're seeing Adam operating in that. And so I think what you said is when you come from the negative of it, right? A lot of times we make such a drastic overcorrection,
Right.
where we're like, I'm going to leave that. So I think Will says a great word. The old school way was you got a prophetic word, you go, thus saith the Lord, right? No, the Bible says we hear and see in part, right? So the best way to do it is where you say, like Will said, hey, praying, I felt this, this is what I felt, like the Lord saying, does this make sense? That's always like operate in the prophetic with humility, right?
Yeah.
And share that. Now, if you have the interpretation, you say, hey, I feel like it might pertain to this, you could do that. But a lot of times, like Will said, we get the right word and the wrong timing. So another side of that coin is, let's say you get a prophetic word, maybe a good one or a bad one. We could live a decade of our life trying to make that word happen or prove that word wrong. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Where we're like, you get this word, you're like, that is not me. I'm not going to do that. So you subconsciously are working to prove that word wrong, when truly that word, you don't even need to like let it in your life. You can say, I'm not going to receive that. I'm going to keep walking forward into what's happening. And a lot of times too, it's like, you get this crazy word, you're going to be a CEO of a business. Well, you want to look at what's in your hands to fulfill what's in your heart. So like, what do you have before you, and keep taking one step in front of it, the next, you know what I mean? And so to me, I think a lot of it in the prophetic is right. And again, this is what I would say. This isn't an invitation to give, Pastor Adam 27 prophetic words from church or
give
stop
each
him.
other, create space with each other.
Exactly.
The leader rarely, the only reason why I feel it was turned to us, like we've been to probably 6 of these, and none of us have ever gotten like a public word of those 6 or 7 times.
I still haven't got
because
mine. Maybe next year.
Yeah, Will's.
I'm gonna text you. Hey, give me a word.
No, you got yours later on that night or the next day or
Yeah,
whatever
you did.
about
Yeah,
your
you did.
campus.
Some
Yeah.
homies.
So
Yeah,
you got
yeah.
the. Oh no, it was before we left. Brad, and who else was there? Daniel, I think it was Daniel.
Yeah,
It was me, you, Brad, and Daniel. You got
I did get a
put
word.
some work to your stuff, and then Joel, and then went into Joel and stuff like that. But yeah. So I mean, it's like normally when those spaces have happened, because like even our boys, Kevin, Ben, they got one the year before, a long one, and they, no one knew that they were in a Bible. And Kevin, Ben have been on this podcast before, Jabberwockies and Kevin, who does restaurants, but. They got one where they do a Monday night Bible study, but these guys are industry guys, and they were literally in the middle of studying the book of Daniel.
And that's when I gave him the word about
you
Daniel.
gave them a word, and we're like, you guys are Daniel, and I think you even referenced them to Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, and there was 3 of us, and then they're like, they start weeping because you're in the fire of culture, but God's got you're scared and and you're doing this study and you're thinking, and I remember that weekend they were thinking, we want to pass this off to like a real church because we're not real ministers, and we're like looking at them like,
no, you gotta keep running.
You're real ministers.
100%.
Don't give this to a church.
Yep.
So a church is going to come in and ruin it
Right.
with systems.
Yeah, all those people are going to leave.
Yeah, exactly. So we're sitting there going, and maybe that is still their work. Maybe in the future they will partner with a church, but just in that moment of they were doing it out of a place of insecurity, of like, we're not worthy, and we were all like, dude, what are you talking about? And so your word of like, not even knowing at that time that's what they were wrestling with and where they were at, and that they're in the study Daniel on their Monday night. So you say, and they start bawling. So that's normally what has happened. Either you or someone else, if we do that worship moment, we do give some space for that. But normally it's like space for one person, 2 people. But because we didn't do it that weekend with each other in groups of 4, it kind of became 2 hours of the night. And it really became an affirmation to us who normally are kind of helping lead, and which I think was appropriately what God did, because we were, all of us who got a word were all in transitional seasons that had a lot of doubt tied to it. Whether it was me or you, and you're on the Patriot team now, and that had before that even had finalized and even had happened, and Julian like needing to. I feel this release that he's a culture carrier.
He is.
Julian is also a general in the LA church. So, it's him embracing that kind of season in his life, and then Julian making his rounds, from person, whether it be, I'm trying to remember everyone he went to. He went to Jeff Osborne. I can't remember if he went to Andrew
He went over to
Carter.
He went over to
Andrew Carter. Yeah.
our boy in El Paso. over there too. He went over.
Oh,
to
he went to Cruise.
Yeah, he went to Cruise.
Yeah. So I mean, it was just it was a really affirming moment. That, and what's crazy is like, Brad comes from a cessationist background. So Brad comes from a background that doesn't believe in the gifts.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until I think 4 or 5 years ago when Dave Gibbons got a hold, who's Dave's been on this podcast before. Dave Gibbons got a hold of Brad, and I think a couple other people, and illuminated Brad into more of the gifts. And now Brad is like, gets really excited about it. And normally half the room is like Baptist in those rooms. Like they don't believe the Spirit moves in that way anyway. But when they look around and see all these people crying, and normally when he breaks us into fours and he does that moment and Brad goes, hey, it's not weird.
Yeah.
If you don't have a word for someone, just affirm them. Say something positive that you've seen about them.
Yeah.
Say I heard you're, a husband, and I'm happy that you're a
exactly.
husband. Like,
exactly.
He's like, just, if it's weird for you, just start somewhere.
Yeah.
And so like for Brad, he was more your caliber, my caliber, in the sense of like, I'm not, I don't view the gifts in that way or anything.
And then he started opening it up.
Yeah. And I've been Pentecostal now for about 8 years. So longer for me, but I also still don't, I spent 7 years in more of the Reformed church.
Yeah.
So I kind of put mind over matter most of the time, but I am so open when someone comes and has control of the gifts.
Yeah.
I totally love it. And I believe my gift is more apostolic. So I believe I can, when I've looked at it spiritually, I believe that I can give authority to a moment, transfer authority into a moment, and I believe God multiplies it. And I think that's more of my gift in the sense of that. I can give validation or affirmation to a place or an experience or a moment, and then if I just back up and then let all the other gifts move, let a preacher preach, let an evangelist evangelize, let a prophet prophesy, then you see those gifts working.
So good.
Then you get a moment, I think, like we saw that night, which was beautiful. And then you got. To me, you got Will then anchoring the whole thing, because that boy was, when you passed it off to him for Julian, I was like, okay, that's
he went deep.
But I think anyone could do that.
Yeah.
Anyone could step into that moment. You could do a Bible study with friends.
Yep.
And you can end them every once in a while saying, hey, let's go around. Let's just listen to worship for a few minutes. We're just gonna play it on our phones or something, and then let's all write each other's names down on a piece of paper, and then let's just write one or two things that come to our mind to affirm.
Yeah.
Some people are going to be really good at it.
Yep.
And then they're going to see, I might have as the person's affirming, like, and you start seeing them crying or you start seeing them smiling, and they're like, hey, that's really an affirmation.
Yeah.
Like when they see that, then you can be like, I might have that muscle.
Right.
I might have that gift.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people do growth track. Growth track will also help you identify your gifts.
Yeah.
But actually going out and pressing into and then speaking into someone's life.
Yeah.
As you see, as you see them, if they start affirming and saying, hey, that's money, you might start recognizing you have a muscle that you could start working out in a non-weird way.
Yeah, and I think there's nothing better than, it requires risk like anything else, where you're stepping out into exercising a new muscle. So like, and then the cool thing is, so like if we did it here and we're praying for Adam and we're just asking the Lord, okay, God, speak to us, and we just stepped out in faith, we could get it wrong. That's totally okay. But if it's right and it affirms it and it's encouraging, upbuilding, it will build faith for all four of us and everyone in the room to say, well, God's doing something, and it kind of raises that level of faith. And so to me, my encouragement too would be, you don't just have to do this even with your friends who are believers. Like just like I did at the AAA guy, I was feeling, I didn't have a specific revelation or anything, but I was feeling, okay, I could have died or I could have gotten badly hurt. God, you're doing something. I was sensing something, and I could have held that back, but I stepped out and I said, man, I just believe God's got a call over your life. We could do that. And what's cool about even Dave, like you said, it was on a podcast, you could do this with people that don't know Jesus, business
you could
leaders.
Do it with Fortune 500. He does it,
Yeah,
and he
exactly.
never puts God on in the sense of the Holy Spirit's told me.
Yeah, you don't have to be weird. You don't have to be like, thus saith the Lord.
Yeah.
You could just say like, hey, I just feel like, man, God's, or you don't even have to say it. You could just say, I just feel like you're in a season of increase, or whatever word you want to say, but then it starts to resonate with them. They're like, how did you know that?
Yeah.
How did you
and
know
then you
this?
can start giving credit to the Lord.
And then you can say, well,
you know,
I believe in Jesus, and I feel like that's what it is, and I want you to does this make sense? And you start to see an increase. So my encouragement for anyone listening that you're feeling excited about this, just start to practice it. Remember, edification, building up. Like Will said, what do you say?
It's not future. It's not a horoscope.
The will, the when, the ways. That's
Yeah.
so great. And then just also know that if you don't have any word, if I have no word for Adam, we always go back. Everything lines up to the Bible. So it's like you could just take a Bible verse and just know that you are fearfully and wonderfully made. And you could give that as a word. But then as you start to practice, you start to see, whoa, this is encouraging. People are being encouraged. And you're not just waiting for different moments. You're actually activating people wherever you go.
Right. You're
Yeah.
seeing the fruit behind
Exactly.
what's
For
kind
sure.
of going on.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and that's where you know where it's
Yeah.
at. That's great.
And sometimes, like, as you get, I would say, like, and this isn't like by any means like materialized, but what I've experienced is as you maybe either get older or as you have authority in a certain space, there are times also that you giving a word will actually give someone permission to step into something that they felt God has placed in their heart.
Yep.
And the example for me is my first Young Guns, and I said it when we had Dave on, but at the end, normally Dave's at Young Guns, he wasn't at this one. Brad says at the end of the night, he looks at Dave and he says, "Hey, do you have a word for anyone in this room?" And Dave normally picks about 2 people. And so that weekend, I never spoke to Dave. I didn't even walk by Dave. And the end of the weekend, he looked over me. He's like, "Yeah, what's your name?" And I was like, "Yeah, my name's Adam." And I was wrestling with, because it was 2021, and I was wrestling with, I was going to start preaching more because me and my dad's transition was happening more. I had this heart to do something deeper digitally because I had came out of marketing, but I was very scared of hubris. I was like, I don't want to be celebritized. I don't want people to think that I'm trying to, make myself famous or trying to, do any of that stuff. So I had this like big internal struggle on embracing my voice. Like I had already become someone in tech and someone in business, some people go to, but none of that was known. None of that was publicized. And all that stuff was always behind the scenes. So it was like I had felt this draw that God was like telling me to come out of the curtain. And I was like, no, I'm not coming out of the curtain. Like, I'm good. I'm good behind the curtain. I want to be with Brad behind the curtain. Like, I want to be Oz. And I felt like God's like, nope. And so that whole weekend, I'm like kind of struggling because I see all these guys and I see people are liking me and like wanting to be, and we're hanging out and
Will's get me in trouble.
Yeah. So I see God like, like kind of challenging me like, man, like build these relationships and I was just like, man, I don't know. And then Dave, as an older person who's powered by the Spirit, he gave me permission because he said, most people need to listen more than they speak. But you've done so much listening. It's time that you start speaking. Wow. Use your voice. It's okay. You're going to be okay. And God sees your humility. And he basically, and so he says, so you need to speak up more. We need to hear you more. And it just that word gave me permission to step into a season that I already knew God was like kind of tugging me at, but just hearing from someone who doesn't know me, who is powered by the Spirit, who speaks to exact moment, this thing I'm wrestling with God, and he materialized permission for me, where God gave me an affirmation to say, and he needed, I feel like the Lord needed another human to tell me that, because God had been telling me that for months, but there was either going to be 2 next steps. Either I was going to hear it from a human and receive it, really 3, or God was going to have to, visit me vocally, or 3, I was going to miss it, and he was going to give it to someone else. And so it was like, that permission was just like, it was so freeing. And then literally when I came back, I then just overdrived. I overdrived my relationships. I overdrived.
That was that first.
ministry.
That was that first Young Guns.
Yeah, that happened that first one.
Which is crazy because we met at that time. And I'm seeing all the shifts that you made.
That's so cool.
And then when we left, normally then the last day, like the last moment, we go around and hey, what are you taking away with? And about 5 people mentioned me. I got to meet Adam and blah blah blah. And a guy that was on The Bachelor, he leaned over at me and he was like, "You seem to make a big impact on people. What did you do this week?" And I was just like, I think for the first time I was myself. You know, that's it. And he was like, and a lot of people, like, you touched a lot of people. And in my head, I'm thinking, I wasn't trying.
Right.
Old Adam would have tried.
Right.
Like, old Adam would have tried to impress the room. Old Adam would have, or old Adam would have just shut down because I would have been scared of how I would have been perceived. But I stepped into that kind of after that first night of meeting you guys and us hanging by the fire. I felt like comfortable. I felt like I met family. I met like potential friends. So I was like, okay, I'm going to start being myself. I'm going to give it a try. And if it don't work, then I'll never come back again.
Right.
Reminds me of Bishop Jakes. He said, "You're the last one to realize your gifts. Everyone else notices it, but for you, because it was just so second nature to you, you're a leader, but you think you're not a leader. You know, you're a great singer, but you think you suck at singing. You're a great strategist, but you think you're not." And he says, other people begin to notice your gifts before you do, and you're the last one to embrace it, right? Because for us, it was so clear. I still remember we're walking to our room, and then he was like, "Hey, that guy's not normal." That was exact phrase. I've never heard anyone say that phrase. So
I said he ain't normal. He built different. I'm telling you. I'm telling you, just that Spidey sense. I'm like, and Will's like, I feel the same way because we're like, it's different. And what's cool about it too is that for me too, is like I've been wanting like deep friendship and like especially the transition of that. So God gave me Will, and we've heard of each other. So we were friends for a few years before that, and then we were like, man, that guy's different. And then to see 4 years later the friendship and see the fruit, but that was a crazy moment.
Yeah, and then lastly, I'll say is like Dr. Robert Clinton, Fuller Seminary professor, says this from researching over 10,000 leaders, historical, modern, and biblical. He says that when you look at the trajectory of leadership formation, at a certain point, every high-level leader hits a ceiling. And what God does is he has to outsource relationships for them to go to where they're going.
Wow.
So he talks about like Apostle Paul, he was growing on his own. And all of a sudden he hits a ceiling. So Barnabas has to vouch for him, and Barnabas takes him into the apostolic council. And it wasn't until he goes to the apostolic council that he gets catalyzed to his next season.
Wow.
So he always says, experience is great, stewardship is great, but that third level is that divine relationship, that sponsorship that comes into your life. And God says this mentor figure or a mutual friend comes in and brings them to that next stage. So he talks about divine relationships, like David to Jonathan or Mary to Martha. And so for me too, during that season, and us three have talked about this, it's like we just kind of felt like we were doing our own thing. And then I just felt like, and then all of a sudden I meet Sammy, I'm like, oh snap, like he gets me. He understands me. Or then I meet you, I'm like, oh, he's several steps ahead of me. And as I build friendship with them, it's like catalyzing me to what God's called me to do. So I think as emerging leaders in whatever market that you're in, keep your eye out to see who God's bringing into your life because God is taking you there. And then at the same time,
and it may not always look like opportunity,
right?
Because like us linking up, it wasn't like an opportunity. Like we didn't really know, and we didn't know anything about each other. You know, it was just the fact of going like, seems authentic, seems like God's here, seems like these are people I could go into battle with. Let's start there. You know,
who would have guessed, bro? After that, I'd be here. You'll be here.
It's crazy.
We're all here. We're all building.
All with the bishop.
You know what I mean? So it's just interesting how God moves behind the scenes without us knowing. You know what I'm saying?
It's crazy. Well, man, y'all, this was a good episode. As always, we never know what we're gonna go into.
People always ask me, hey, how do you prepare for a podcast?
I was wondering. I was like,
Adam starts talking.
Adam starts talking.
I was like, I wonder what we're going to talk about this time.
Welcome to PTL.
It'll find it. It'll find it.
This is a great episode for that gift, the prophecy gift, to point people to, hey, if you have any questions, even coming out of the Bible sprint, and you kind of touched on, the New Testament, New Testament gift of prophecy and stuff like that. This is a great resource for people to go to on like, wait, so what
materialize?
What does that gift look like? That Pastor
how could I do
about?
It tomorrow?
Yeah, exactly. How could I do this? What does it look like? What's up? What does it not look like? Oh, okay, that's what it looks like. Oh, that's cool. Okay, good.
For sure. Yeah, well, everybody, man, thanks for joining us. If you got any crazy stories of maybe how things have been affirmed or maybe you have a crazy story on how it went bad, let us know.
We want to hear them both.
Yeah, tell us both. Next. We'll do that maybe a Halloween episode.
Don't do any racial stuff. Go story. I had a friend that got prayer from a guy, Asian dude, and this guy's like, hey, I see chopsticks.
No,
That's not the spirit. That's your
don't do
prejudice.
that.
That's your racism.
Don't mention
We'll do that. We'll do
tacos.
the
Sammy Rodriguez. I see a taco
yeah,
truck.
we'll close with
playing
this
for
'cause
Jeff. I see a basketball.
I got him too. I was 1 month away from proposing to Ashley, and one of our pastors here on staff went to Ashley and said, because we kept our dating really private, and so he went up to her and he said, the Lord has told me that you have been struggling over your season of singleness, and that you have been single and you're lonely and you're not with anyone right now, and he's just spending time working on you, and so just spend this time leaning on God. Stop looking for a boyfriend. God will send you a boy. Does all this stuff, and then he leaves, and she calls me. She's like, "So I guess we're not dating."
I got a story like that too.
I got another
So
horror
many-
story. but
so
we'll give
many-
it next
we
one.
should definitely
I got an
do-
abuse one for sure.
We should definitely do horror stories because that would be fun. And just talk about it because I got a funny one from Mobile, Alabama.
Yeah,
but we'll talk
maybe
about it.
Yeah, maybe because that would be. I have another really good one. We'll save it. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Peace.
Love y'all. Peace.